The CEO of CNN is out of the company as of this morning, amid the network's low ratings and diminishing revenue. Saudi Arabia's LIV Golf tournament is merging with the United States PGA Tour to host a joint tournament, and New York City's Mayor Eric Adams is proposing paying everyday citizens to allow migrants in their homes. This is the noteworthy news that you need to know for today, Wednesday, June 7th, 2023. But first, be sure to hit the subscribe button down below so that you can stay tuned anytime I post a news video or a timeless video. And be sure to follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Julie R. Hartman. This first story seems to follow a pattern of a shakeup with regard to mainstream media, both on the left and on the right. Don't we all remember that day about a month ago when Don Lemon of CNN and Tucker Carlson of Fox were fired within the same day? Actually, just within a few hours of each other in the morning. Again, it seems like things are sort of shifting with regard to these household name networks. And that was certainly the case this morning when CNN sent an email to its employees announcing that the CEO, Chris Licht, the short-lived CEO, only at the company for 13 months, was officially out, effective immediately. Before his time at CNN, Mr. Licht was actually an executive producer of the highly rated Stephen Colbert late night show. He moved to CNN amid a time of turmoil, which I'm going to get to in a moment, and seeking to revitalize the network's ratings and revenue. Unfortunately, though, or perhaps fortunately, depending on how you look at it, it happened the opposite way. Ratings have plummeted as well as revenue for the network under his tenure. A certain select group of higher-ups at CNN are going to take his position in the meantime, and they have said that it will probably take a few months for a new CEO of the company to be named. So let's look back at some of these instances of turmoil that I am referring to. First, a few months ago, CNN ventured to go into the streaming service platform, launching CNN Plus, which totally flopped. Within just about a week or two, they announced that they would be shutting it down because only a few tens of thousands of viewers initially signed up and watched the things that were offered on that streaming service. As a consequence of CNN Plus's failure, there were many layoffs that rippled throughout the company, causing even more discomfort and turmoil amongst the ranks. Under the tenure of Chris Licht, he tried to revitalize the network by starting a morning show that was co-anchored by Don Lemon. That didn't do quite as well as they might have hoped. Additionally, CNN recently hosted a town hall featuring President Donald Trump, which earned the ire of many of the constituents, or I should say viewers of CNN, as well as even some ire among the people who work at CNN. For instance, Anderson Cooper came out on his show, Anderson Cooper 360, and said that he did not like the fact that the network was giving a platform to this supposedly bigoted president. Over the past 13 months that Mr. Licht has been the CEO, CNN only generated $750 million in revenue. That was down from $1.25 billion in revenue the year before. And just as icing on the cake, The Atlantic published a brutal piece criticizing Mr. Licht just about a week ago. It was 15,000 words talking about his stormy tenure as CEO. So all of that combined kicked him out of office, it seems, effective again this morning. These problems have been plaguing CNN, though, for longer than just these 13 months. Really, the stormy weather, if you will, started back at the end of 2021 when Chris Cuomo, who was one of the most favored primetime news hosts, was fired amid an ethics scandal pertaining to his brother, then the governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo. A few months later, Jeff Zucker, the former CEO of CNN, was also fired for allegedly having improper relations with an employee and not disclosing those improper relations to CNN. And then, of course, there was that shakeup that I mentioned at the beginning of this segment where Don Lemon, according to Mr. Lemon, was very abruptly and without any kind of notice fired from his primetime position. It seems that it may be a good thing that the mainstream media, not just CNN, Fox News as well, but for the sake of today, I'll focus on CNN because of this news, maybe a good thing that the mainstream media is getting a bit of a shakeup. CNN has been wrong on many issues and, in fact, peddled many falsehoods over the past few years. For instance, they were vociferous defenders of the fact that former President Donald Trump allegedly colluded with the Russians in order to win the 2016 election. This has since been disproven, among other things, by the Durham report, and it was exposed, actually, that the Clinton campaign hired a law firm, which hired a Fusion GPS, which got the spy Christopher Steele to make up this phony charge that President Trump had colluded with the Russians. CNN, for months and months and months, was saying that this was legitimate, that President Trump did collude, and then made a mealy-mouthed retraction once the Durham report exposed the truth. Additionally, CNN was among the ranks of those who denounced anyone who said that COVID may have leaked from a lab. Remember that? People thought that COVID had come from a wet market in China. It had spread from a bat. CNN was one of those networks that peddled that, and in fairness to CNN, a lot of people did believe it, but they denounced those who thought it may have come from the Wuhan Institute of Virology as conspiracy theorists. Additionally, the Hunter Biden laptop story. CNN reporting, not their editorials, of course, yes, their editorials, but just their plain objective reporting, said that the Hunter Biden laptop story did seem to have the earmarks of Russian disinformation. That also was proven to be false. And as I reported on yesterday on this program, as recently as earlier this week, CNN alleged that what's coming out about our president right now, President Biden taking a $5 million bribe from foreign nationals while he was vice president, CNN is saying that this may be fake news and just some propaganda implanted by Rudy Giuliani. Perhaps the diminishing viewership, the diminishing revenue, and the shakeup in the higher ranks may wake up this network to the fact that they have to change their ways. Now on to the second story of today. Golf fans, my male producers, will love this one. There is a synergy happening, a partnership between the United States' actually historic adversary, Saudi Arabia, and the United States as far as hosting a joint golf tournament. Now, this goes beyond just being noteworthy sports news. This is actually important for our international relations with this country, which over the past few months have been especially icy. Yesterday, on Tuesday, the Saudi-backed LIV Golf group announced that they were merging with PGA, which is the group of professional golf tours, I should say the organization of professional golf tours here in the United States, as well as Europe's DP World Tour, to host a joint tournament with all three of those groups somewhere in the world. We don't yet know the location. This is great for professional golfers around the world who no longer have to choose between which tournament they're going to go to. Now, this is all in one place. It is also probably very good for viewers of this tournament to see it in a centralized location. But it was not always this way, this merger. Actually, over the past few months, this LIV group of Saudi Arabia and the PGA Tour were embattled in a legal dispute. Saudi Arabia launched this LIV group with $620 billion from a public investment fund to reinvigorate golf. That's what the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman said. So this is pretty recent. Only a couple of months ago, this was launched, or I should say about a year ago, this group was launched. And they were, in order to fund this group, they were talking about awarding more prize money and signing bonuses to golfers who would participate in the tournament. And the PGA Tour Commissioner Jay Moynihan here of the United States accused the Saudis of bribery, quote, trying to buy the game of golf by offering more money, more prizes, more goodies to those golfers that would choose to participate in the Saudi tournament over American tournaments. So this led to the Saudis and the Americans locking horns with regard to golf. Lawsuits after lawsuits were exchanged. Even our Department of Justice got involved, launching an investigation into whether the PGA, why do I keep saying J? Clearly I'm a woman. Clearly I'm a woman. PGA, this is not the thing I follow very often, forgive me. PGA was perhaps manipulating the sports market by interfering here with the Saudis and suing the Saudis. It seems, though, that they came to the realization that they would be better as friends than enemies. Both sides dropped this litigation. Now they are coming together to host this joint golf tournament, and they have suspended, they meaning the PGA, has suspended their previous position that they would pursue litigation and penalties against golfers who would go to the LIV tournament, okay? So there are two ways to look at this with regard to foreign policy. We've already gotten to the point where we say that it's probably good for both competitors and watchers of this tournament. Let's talk about this from a foreign policy perspective. Two ways to look at it. One way is that this is kind of embarrassing for President Biden. President Biden has been historically at odds with the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman of Saudi Arabia. I've talked about it on this show ad nauseum. But as a primer for those who haven't been listening or are new to the show, President Biden campaigned on the fact that he would at every turn try to isolate the Saudis. He has said that he wanted to make Mohammed bin Salman, quote, a pariah with regard to the United States because the Saudis have a lot of control over oil and with OPEC. President Biden entreated to the Saudis a few months ago, begging them to produce more oil so that we could get it to send to the United States. This is because President Biden, as part of his green new energy products, said that he would not frack and drill here in the United States. So then in turn, we entreat to our adversaries to get more oil. It's very screwed up, but nevertheless, President Biden did entreat to the Saudis to get more oil. The Saudis originally said yes, and then they turned around and said no, that they would not be sending the United States more oil. This was a way of the Crown Prince to indicate to President Biden that he had power over President Biden. So the reason why I'm saying that this Gulf merger of the United States and Saudi Arabia may be embarrassing is that the Saudis are indicating that they have power and influence in the United States, that they can go around a president. They can actually be rude and undermine a president, as they gave the backhand to President Biden, and still have outsized influence in different sectors of the United States economy, as evidenced by hosting this joint golf tournament. Additionally, the Saudis, through this public investment fund that I mentioned, are trying to seep into other ways of American life. They've invested in luxury resorts, both in the United States and in Saudi Arabia, to draw American tourists. Additionally, the Saudis invest in the United States luxury electric vehicle manufacturer Lucid Motors, and they are also investing in a lot of American venture capital and private equity funds. And in fact, this LIV Golf group actually has hosted tournaments at President Donald Trump's golf estates, if you will, here in the United States. So yes, on the one hand, this seems embarrassing to President Biden that the Saudis can come in and have such influence here after giving the president the backhand. On the other hand, if you're an optimist, you can look at this as potentially a positive development for thawing relations between the Saudis and the Americans. Back in 1971, there was this phenomena called ping pong diplomacy with regard to the United States and China. Since the 1949 revolution in China, when the Chinese Communist Party came to power, United States and China had been at odds, and Americans had not visited China in those 25 years. What happened, though, was that there was a ping pong tournament that was hosted in China. And Americans sent some of their best ping pong players to go over to communist China to compete in the tournament. And so the reason why they called this ping pong diplomacy is that it was thawing relations. By sending athletes over, it was indicating in a benign but nevertheless friendly way, we would like to open the door with more relations with you. And then we see throughout the 70s, 80s, 90s, and certainly today, those relations between the United States and China, for better or for worse, have proliferated. Perhaps this will be Gulf diplomacy with regard to Saudi Arabia and the United States. But we will just have to see. We will keep you updated on any relevant developments with regard to this tournament. Maybe there'll be some great golfers who will be setting records. I'm going to leave it to my male producers to update me on that so I can in turn update you on that. And finally, domestic news. The mayor of New York City, Eric Adams, is proposing yet another sort of wild venture here, that he would like to potentially subsidize New York City residents to host migrants in their private homes, okay? I have reported on this show, and even those who don't watch the show are probably well aware, if you are at all alive and awake in the world, is that there is a huge migrant crisis all around our country, and it is especially plaguing big cities. Specifically, these so-called sanctuary cities where mayors and governors, such as Eric Adams, have affirmed that immigrants crossing the southern border could come and have a safe shelter there. I'm going to put up some tweets that Eric Adams tweeted both on his campaign trail to be mayor and then during his tenure as mayor, saying that New York City is a safe haven for migrants, that they welcome these individuals, and the government of New York will seek to protect them. Eric Adams has followed through on that promise. 46,000 asylum seekers have gone to New York City alone in the past year. 72,000 arrivals actually since last spring. So that maybe I have this backwards here. 46,000 asylum seekers in the last year, but then 72,000 since last spring. That seems 72,000 is more than 46,000. This is from the mayor's office, though. So take it up with Eric Adams, not me. The point is, well over 100,000 migrants have likely gone into New York City over the past few months. It has cost the city more than $1.2 billion in this fiscal year alone, and it is projected to cost New York City $4.3 billion by June of 2024. Now, the federal government, according to the mayor's office, has provided New York City with $40 million to help with this migrant crisis. According to Eric Adams, that will help the city for 5 days. So we can see that there is a real issue here. Eric Adams has put some of these migrants in hotels around the city and has had struggled actually to evict them after a few weeks, these migrants who want to stay in the hotels. Those who live in New York have reported anecdotally to people like me and also to media outlets that migrants are living on street corners. It is really a humanitarian, not to mention a resource crisis now in the United States. So Eric Adams is proposing to potentially subsidize residents to keep migrants in their homes. He also would like to place migrants in churches. He wants to take churches and make them into housing centers. Additionally, he would like these churches to provide migrants with food, water, and clothing. He announced that he is seeking a partnership with the New York Disaster Interfaith Services to provide space for 1,000 migrants. He has so far secured this agreement among 50 churches, synagogues, mosques, and temples around New York City. That just seems like a dent in a much bigger problem here. I mean, if it's providing space for 1,000 migrants across these 50 places of worship, and there's over 100,000 migrants coming over the past year, my gosh, we need a much bigger, more effective solution for this grave issue. Even Eric Adams has admitted that, quote, "This is not sustainable anymore, this migrant crisis." He said, it is in the best interest of everyone, including those seeking to come to the United States, to be upfront that New York City cannot single-handedly provide care to everyone crossing our border, he said. Our city has done more than enough to support asylum seekers than any other city in the nation, but the unfortunate reality is that the city has extended itself further than its resources will allow. Eric Adams invited this problem. Let us see how he intends to solve it. Thank you all very much for joining me today. Reminder, hit the subscribe button, follow me at Julie R. Hartman, and I will see you all soon. Take care.